Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started in a few minutes, so if you could come forward and find a place to sit, please. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome, and thank you all for being here at the annual award ceremony and presidential address. My name is Jim Ramo from Princeton University, but much more relevant for my role today. I had the honor of serving as the vice president of PAA last year and worked very closely with last year's president, Lisa Berkman, to organize the meetings in New Orleans last year. I hope those of you who were there had a good time in New Orleans. Lisa asked me to serve as the moderator or presider or whatever the name of the role is, and it's my real pleasure to be able to walk us through the award ceremony today. I'd like to just begin by thanking Lisa for being a wonderful colleague. Organizing the Population Association of America meetings is not an easy task. It's a full year task. And Lisa was a wonderful colleague to work with. I think we really more or less split the duties right down the middle and worked together on everything. And it was a wonderful opportunity to get to know a wonderful person. So thank you, Lisa, for being a great colleague last year. A couple of other things I'd like to say before we get started. I'd like to share a couple of words of thanks and a couple of words of welcome. First, having just talked about our own organizing of last year's PAA meetings, I'd like to say thank you to the current president, Jennifer Glass, and current vice president, Susan Brown, for organizing the meetings that we're all enjoying here in Columbus. And lest any of you think that it's the vice president and president who put everything together, I'm here to tell you that is not the case, and we wouldn't be here enjoying these meetings if it wasn't for the PAA staff, Danielle and her wonderful staff, who really make it possible for us to enjoy PAA every year. So thank you. Yeah. And of course, I would like to welcome all of you here, but I'd like to express special welcome for two groups of attendees. The first group is our colleagues who have come from overseas to participate in the meetings here in Columbus. I think we are all very well aware that the fact that we have so many colleagues, demographers, population scientists from all over the world who regularly come to and engage here with us at PAA. This is what makes PAA PAA. So I really want to give a special welcome and thanks to all of you who have come here from abroad. And the other special welcome is to first-time attendees. I realized walking around, well, I actually knew because several of our own students are here as first-time attendees, but I saw the little yellow ribbons on the badges indicating first-time attendee. And I think many of us who have been coming to PAA for many years or decades, as the case may be, vividly remember our first PAA and that sort of kid in a candy shop feeling that we had when we first realized how great these meetings were. And I really hope that those of you who are here for the first time are having that same sense of excitement and inspiration that I know that many of us who have been here for a while felt in our first PAA meetings. So welcome. So we will start the award ceremony shortly, but before that, Danielle Stout, the PAA Executive Director, has a few words she would like to share, some housekeeping instructions, I guess. So Danielle, please.
All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you, Jim, for those kind words. Here we go. Okay, well, welcome to Columbus. This is not only a great city to host this meeting, but it is my home state, so I'm excited to see all of you here. I hope you've had time to explore the city and enjoy what it has to offer. I do have a few quick bits of information to share with you. First, our membership meeting is tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in Harrison. This is your opportunity to learn about what's going on with PAA, our big projects like government relations and demography. It's also your opportunity to share your thoughts and ask questions about your organization. So I hope you can join me and everyone else with that. As is our tradition, coffee and donuts will be available. We'll share 2 Ohio favorites, donuts from Buckeye Donuts, which I've seen several boxes around here, and bagels from Toledo's Berries Bagels. I have waxed poetic to pretty much anybody who would listen the last 2 years about the wonderfulness of berry bagels. Please come to this meeting and eat them and prove me right. And also to my fellow Northwest Ohioans, happy 419 Day. Oh, 419, sorry. 419 is the area code for Northwest Ohio, and we all celebrate on April 19th. Feedback. We welcome your feedback on PAA 2024 and everything that we do. We'll send out a post-meeting survey early next week. Your feedback helps us improve your meeting experience, so please take some time to respond and think about when you respond to this survey, like what level of percentage you would want from respondents to your survey. And let's go there. Let's go for 50, 70%, that'd be great. A few more things, future meeting locations. A couple you might know and one we've just signed on for. Next year, please join us in Washington, D.C. at the Marriott Marquis, April 9 through 12. The Marriott Marquis is not our usual D.C. home. The Wardman finally went condo. And Marriott Marquis is located in the Convention Center District and the Chinatown area, so there's a lot to do around there and you'll be able to really enjoy yourself. In 2026, we'll be in St. Louis, Missouri at America's Center. This was the original location for the 2021 annual meeting. We'll be there May 6 through 9, and it's going to be our first convention center meeting, so I'm really excited to see how that goes. And finally, our latest contract for 2027 is Seattle, Washington. At the Hyatt Regency, Seattle, March 31st to April 1st. I promise we won't have any jokes on that day. And finally, I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to thank everyone who helped bring this together. Unfortunately, there is a time limit and somebody will start playing music and there'll be a hook and they'll take me off the stage. So I do want to quickly recognize the PAA staff who work on this meeting, Betsy Alifagenes, Francesca Morton, and Bobby Westmoreland. Every bit of praise I hear about this meeting is due to them and how much they care about what they do and how much they care about this field and this community. So thank you to the three of you so much. And finally, thank all of you for being such a kind and wonderful membership. I can't tell you how pleasant and great it is to work with this entire community. So with that, I will turn it back over to Jim. Thank you.
Okay, to begin the awards ceremony, I would first like to invite Mary Jo Hoeksema to come to the podium. Many of you know Mary Jo. She is the Government and Public Affairs Director for PAA, an extremely important committee that Mary Jo has served as the leader of for many years, and she is here to present the PAA Excellence in Public Service Awards.
Hello, everyone. It's my honor to announce the winners of the 2024 PAA Excellence in Public Service Award. In 2008, the PAA Board of Directors created this award to honor policymakers who have been especially supportive of the population sciences and the federal scientific and statistical research agencies that directly and indirectly support the field. This year, the selection committee chose 2 recipients from the legislative and executive branches of the federal government. Our first recipient is the Honorable Grace Ming, who represents the 6th Congressional District of New York. As a senior member of the House Commerce, Justice, Science, Appropriations Subcommittee, which is responsible for funding the Census Bureau, Representative Ming has led efforts to preserve and strengthen the integrity of census data and provide the agency with robust funding. Further, Representative Ming has had a long-standing commitment to addressing the persistent undercount of young children in the decennial census. Most recently, she sponsored an amendment to strike language from the House Fiscal Year 2024 Commerce, Justice, Science Appropriations Bill that would have excluded undocumented immigrants from state population totals used for congressional apportionment. As you can see from the picture, Representative Ming received her award last month during the 2024 PAA Advocacy Day in Washington, D.C. Please join me in congratulating Representative Ming. Our second recipient is Dr. Mark Rosenblum, Executive Director of the Office of Homeland Security Statistics at the Department of Homeland Security. Dr. Rosenblum was selected in recognition of his long-standing commitment to improving the quality and dissemination of data produced by the Department of Homeland Security. Mark's determination to enhance DHS statistical data products and raise the profile of the former Office of Immigration Statistics led to the successful establishment of the new Office of Homeland Security Statistics in November 2023. As a result, the office is now an independent statistical reporting unit within the department. Throughout his tenure at DHS, Dr. Rosenblum has consistently engaged with data users, including the PAA Committee on Government Affairs and the PAA Committee on Population Statistics. He always seeks our input and shares his expertise with us, including participating in our congressional briefing series. Please join me in congratulating Dr. Mark Rosenblum. Mark?
Thank you, Mary Jo, and thank you, PAA, for those kind words and for this award. It was totally unexpected, and I'm really touched and honored by it. I also want to thank you for giving me such a good reason to attend this meeting. I don't get to nearly as many conferences as I would like, and I've really enjoyed being here the last couple of days. Since this award recognizes my public service, I want to take a moment to say something about my career path and my experience working in the public sector, and hopefully inspire some of you graduate students to consider working at the Office of Homeland Security Statistics or another public sector position. I started my career as an academic political scientist. I studied immigration policy. In 2005, I spent a year in DC on a fellowship, splitting my time between the Migration Policy Institute and the Senate Judiciary Committee. After returning to my university for 2 years, I spent the next 7 years back at MPI, at the Congressional Research Service, at MPI for a third tour, and then I moved to DHS in 2016. So I've seen the policy world from lots of different angles, and I'm in a good position to encourage you to consider a career in public service. I loved being a professor and my think tank work, but as someone who cares about real-world policy issues, my positions in Congress and the executive branch have been by far the most interesting and most rewarding phases of my career. One thing that's been rewarding about my government positions has been the fact that I've repeatedly worked with policymakers with an insatiable appetite for data. It's easy to be cynical about the policymaking process, but I can tell you from experience that most political leaders and their staffs genuinely want to understand the policy issues they work on, including what policies do or don't work and how ineffective policies might be improved. Obviously, that's not to say that all policy decisions are strictly data-driven for at least 2 reasons. First, using data to inform policy decisions is hard. It's partly hard because data are not fine-tuned to inform reporting and analysis. In the case of administrative data, like DHS data on immigration benefits or enforcement, data are mainly collected for case management, not for reporting and analysis. So available records often don't include the information that's most relevant for policymakers. For example, ICE officers have no operational reason to collect race and ethnicity data of people in detention, but DHS needs race and ethnicity data if it wants to do research on whether or not there's bias in the detention system. So we often need to work with operators to expand their data holdings or find workarounds or come up with other creative ways to measure the things that we care about. Administrative data are collected in challenging environments and under time pressure, so the data that do exist need a lot of cleaning and curating. DHS data and data for most large organizations are collected and stored in dozens of standalone systems that evolve over time in separate silos, so many of the most important analytic questions also require substantial work to link data sets that lack common definitions or identifiers. These many steps to go from data collection to an analytic data set are not unique to DHS. They're true of almost all government entities and almost all large organizations. Then once the data are cleaned and linked, most policy questions are nuanced and complex, and boiling the findings down to a bullet or two or a figure that makes sense to busy policymakers is a huge part of my job and a critical step in using data to influence decisions. Smart policymakers often ask hard follow-up questions, so the best decision support tools are dynamic dashboards that allow real-time scenario analysis. So when we get all of this right, to get all of this right is a lot of work, but it's very rewarding because strong decision support tools are a game changer for leaders who want to make evidence-based decisions, and most of them recognize good value when they see it. Even when all these tools are in place, the second big challenge to evidence-based policymaking is that leaders are constrained by politics. That's inherent in a democratic system. But those political constraints can definitely be frustrating, but they relate to the other rewarding part of my job, which is to make data available to the public and to contribute to a more informed public debate. Even in today's world, and really especially in today's world, this feels incredibly important in my work on immigration and the broader DHS mission space. DHS hasn't always been a leader in data transparency, but the department has given new authority to my office to expand our public reporting, and we're absolutely committed to making DHS a government-wide leader in making administrative data available to researchers and others. As a former academic and a think tank researcher, I'm passionate about that mission. The final point I want to make is that this is a really exciting time to work with data in the federal government. It's partly exciting for the same reasons that data work in general is exciting right now. We have new tools, we have access to new data sets, and a new focus on our skill sets. And it's also exciting because the federal government is newly empowering statistical agencies to do more with data. The 2018 Foundations of Evidence-Based Policymaking Act directed federal agencies to appoint statistical officials to champion data quality and to work with CDOs and evaluation officers to oversee data governance, increase data transparency, and support evidence-building activities. The Evidence Act encourages data sharing across federal agencies, and I attended a great panel yesterday where CNSTAT laid out their vision for what a system that focuses on shared data for the common good might look like. Federal statisticians and data scientists will build that system. The Evidence Act also creates a process to establish new independent federal statistical agencies. And my office recently transitioned from being the Office of Immigration Statistics, reporting up through the Secretary, to being the independent Office of Homeland Security Statistics. We're still early in the stages of that transition, but it's already allowed us to launch several new independent reports, and it also means we're planning to triple in size over the next 4 or 5 years. So now more than ever, please visit our website, download our data, and keep an eye out for openings to work at OHSS. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Jo, and big congratulations to Representative Ming and Dr. Rosenblum. Next, I would like to invite to the podium Sangeeta Vyas, who is the chair of the Dorothy S. Thomas Award Committee, and she herself is the 2021 Dorothy Thomas Award winner. Sangeeta.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sangeeta, and I'm an economist at CUNY Hunter College. The Dorothy S. Thomas Award is presented annually at PAA for the best grad student paper on the interrelationships among social, economic, and demographic variables. Dorothy Swain Thomas was an American sociologist and economist. She was the 42nd president of the American Sociological Association and the first woman to serve in this role. She was also the 22nd president of the Population Association of America. Two features of Thomas's work really stand out: the importance of careful measurement and her sensitivities to the interplay between demographic and economic change. At a time when professional academic careers were virtually closed to women, Thomas made a lasting impact on the field and can be considered one of the founders of American demography. So I would like to thank the other members of the committee, Chinyere Agbai at Ohio State University, Sarah Burgard at University of Michigan, Aaron Ice at University of Michigan, Scott Lynch at Duke University, and Jenna Nobles at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. This year, we received 21 excellent submissions, and it's my honor to name Fernanda Rojas Ampuero as the 2024 Dorothy S. Thomas Award recipient for her paper, Sent Away: The Long-Term Effects of Slum Clearance on Children.
Hello, everyone. I have some words to say. So thank you, Sangeeta, and thank you, the committee, for this award. I feel very honored. It was very unexpected. So my paper is about slum clearance and the effects of moving people to peripheral sectors of the city. I studied the long-term consequences of these policies on children's human capital in the context of Chile, where I come from. I want to thank my co-author, Felipe Carrera, my peers and friends at UCLA, where I got my PhD in economics, where some of them are here. But I really want to thank my advisors for this. This paper wouldn't be possible without them. I want to thank these three amazing economists, economic historians, and demographers, Dora Costa, Michela Giorcelli, and Adriana Gerasmuni, who was also an awardee of the Dorothy Thomas Award. I want to thank UCLA Department of Economics, from where I got my PhD, and the California Center for Population Research, where I was an affiliated student for providing resources to grad students. I am now at the University of Wisconsin-Madison as an assistant professor, and I am also affiliated to the Center for Demography and Ecology. So I really hope to keep working on the consequences of forced displacements on children in the years to come. So thank you very much. I feel very honored.
Great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Danny Schneider, and I'm pleased to present the PAA Early Achievement Award. Established in 2009, the PAA Early Achievement Award recognizes the career of a promising scholar who is a member of PAA. The award is given biennially in even years to scholars who have made distinguished contributions to population research during the first 10 years after the receipt of the PhD. I'm standing in for the committee's chair, Professor Katrina Wasselman, the Roger Lipsitz Distinguished Chair in Health Policy at the University of Maryland, who is not able to be here this evening. Katrina and I were joined on the committee by Brian Sykes, Christy Irving, Christine Schwartz, Kari White, and Miles Taylor. I extend Katrina's thanks to the committee. We were very fortunate to have a very strong pool of nominees for this award, attesting to the strength and innovation of scholarship in demography. I'm delighted to announce that from this highly qualified pool, the committee selected Dr. Matthew Hauer as the recipient of the PAA Early Achievement Award. Dr. Hauer is an associate professor of sociology at Florida State University, where he holds the Charles B. Nam Professorship in the Sociology of Population and serves as the associate director of the Center for Demography and Population Health. Dr. Hauer's research tackles one of the most pressing concerns of our time, the population impact of climate change. In his work, he implements high-quality demographic projection methods using innovative data to estimate how climate change affects local communities, their migration patterns, and their health and mortality. He curates and shares these data with the scientific community and effectively communicates his findings with the public and policymakers. His work not only enhances our understanding of the population-level effects of climate change, but also underscores the crucial importance of demography for this important policy issue and makes the case why he is most deserving of the PAA Early Career Achievement Award. Congratulations, Matt.
I'm really glad there's a very bright light, so I can't really see anybody. I want to first thank Danny for those very, very kind words, and the members of the committee as well. I like to think about my career as not really being my career, because it's a product of so many other people and influences, both directly and indirectly. And without any of their support, I would not be here. And in particular, I'm very thankful for my wonderful wife, Jennifer, who has put up with me for a number of years now. She's not an academic, so she keeps me really grounded in reality and really not stuck in the clouds. I'm also very thankful for my 2 young children as well, who are partly responsible for my current hairdo. And I also want to thank all of my professors that worked with me at Florida State when I was a graduate student. People like Carl Schmertman, Karen Brewster, Ike Eberstein, and Woody Carlson in particular. I also really want to thank Warren Brown. Warren took a massive gamble on hiring a 23-year-old without a PhD into a faculty position at the University of Georgia. And then he pushed me to get a PhD. And without his nudge, I for certain would not be standing up here today. And lastly, I really want to thank and acknowledge all of the other demographers doing the very hard work on environment and climate change. In particular, Valerie Muller, Clark Gray, Beth Fussell, Leah Van Wy, and Elizabeth Frankenberg, who have helped support me. You have all invested very heavily in me and my work. Some of you greased the rails to allow my work to actually be done. And I am just simply following in the wake that you guys have left. And I hope that my own research is going to provide a similar wake for other grad students and postdocs who come after me. So thank you all.
Good evening, I'm Wendy Manning from Bowling Green State University. It's my great privilege to announce the winner of the Clifford C. Clogg Award. This award recognizes achievements of an individual who is considered mid-career, that's 10 to 20 years out from their PhD. I'd like to recognize the hard work of our committee, including Jen Dowd from Oxford University, Steve Trejo from University of Texas, Austin, and Tufoko Zuberi from University of Pennsylvania. We were truly impressed with the pool of excellent candidates. For those who you don't know, Clifford C. Clogg was an Ohioan. And for those of you who don't know, that means someone from Ohio. And he was born in Oberlin, Ohio, and was raised on a farm about 112 miles northeast of here. And he graduated from Ohio University, about 75 miles southeast of Columbus. I knew and worked with Cliff when I was a postdoc at Penn State, so I can personally attest that the winner of this award shares many of his characteristics, including focusing on methodological challenges, engaging in interdisciplinary work, dedicating time and effort to service, and demonstrating great collegiality and kindness. So it's my great honor to announce the winner of the 2024 Clifford C. Clogg Award. That's Dr. Jenna Nobles from the Sociology Department at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'm almost there. I was just going to introduce a few qualities of Jenna's work. So she has made significant contributions to population science, focusing on migration, fertility, and environmental change. Her work spans many countries, including the US, Mexico, Indonesia, and Brazil, and draws on survey data, administrative data, as well as novel data linkages. It's impressive that her work emphasizes causal estimation with an extensive and sophisticated methodological toolkit. She's been generous with her time and enhanced the quality of population science through her service roles at PAA, NIH, the Academies of Science, and her home institution. So I'm pleased that PAA has recognized Dr. Noble's outstanding substantive research, exceptional methodological breadth and rigor, and remarkable leadership. Congratulations.
you all so much. This was entirely unexpected and really wonderful, an honor to receive, particularly humbling when you read and learn about Cliff Clogg. So thank you to Penn State for creating this award and supporting the memory of Cliff's life and career. Nothing about my career has been produced alone, and I owe a very special thank you to Elizabeth Frankenberg and Duncan Thomas, my longtime mentors and friends. I can only hope that over the course of the next few decades, I can do work that has some small fraction of the important impact on our field as they have. To my wonderful collaborators, I'm very lucky to work with you. Florencia Torche and I have spent a lot of the last few years working over Zoom calls with babies and toddlers in the background. And without your generosity, humor, brilliance, and energy, it's pretty hard to imagine what the last few years would have been like. And a special thank you to Wisconsin. Where are the CDE crew? Okay, it is bright. So CDE is a really dynamite place to work. I've been very, very lucky to work there. To Alberto Poloni and Betty Thompson, who've been longtime mentors and colleagues. And of course, to Eric Grodsky and Marcy Carlson and Christine Schwartz and Catherine Curtis and Lonnie Berger and Malia Jones, the list goes on and on. I am very lucky to work with you, and I appreciate that opportunity. And then finally to my spouse, Nathan Jones, who is a recovered demographer. I met him at this event 20-some years ago, and he makes most of what I do possible. Thank you.
It is bright, everyone's right. Hi, everyone. My name is Michal Engelman from the University of Wisconsin-Madison as well, and I'm delighted to present the Mindle C. Sheps Award on behalf of the committee, which also included Kenneth Land, Adrian Raftery, Franz Wilkins, and Claire Yang. The Mindle C. Sheps Award recognizes outstanding contributions to formal and mathematical demography, and this year's winner is Joshua R. Goldstein, the Chancellor's Professor of Demography at the University of California, Berkeley. He directs the Berkeley Population Center and also the Berkeley Formal Demography Workshop, a summer program which has trained over 200 junior scholars and therefore played a key role in maintaining the vitality of formal demography for the next generation of scholars and PAA members. Goldstein's use of mathematical demography to shed light on key population processes has helped expand the scope of formal demographic methods beyond sort of classic fertility, mortality, to a broad array of topics, including divorce and marriage, kinship, aging, and more. He's expanded our analytic toolkits for simulation and forecasting and has actually an unusual record of accurate predictions, not just forecasting, including a 1999 prediction of leveling in US divorce rates and 2009 prediction of rebounds from lowest low fertility in Europe. So this research has both drawn on formal demographic methods and extended them. His work has shown that formal demographic methods are relevant and central to addressing some of our world's most pressing problems. As recently as February 2021, when there was massive public debate about how to prioritize the allocation of then very newly developed COVID-19 vaccines, Josh and colleagues wrote a paper using a newly proven theorem about life tables to show that two key criteria of saving lives overall and saving the most future years of lives were not in conflict, and both pointed towards vaccinating the oldest old first. This research showcased the potential of formal demography to contribute both to evidence-based policy and to the public's understanding of it. So for his outstanding contributions to research and his central role in providing a structure for ongoing training in mathematical and formal demography, the committee is very proud to recognize him with the 2024 Mindle C. Sheps Award.
Nothing prepares you for the spotlights. Okay. So thank you, Michal. Thank you to the committee, and thank you for PAA for this enormous honor. It's a deep, deep honor to be getting an award for mathematical demography, and particularly one that's named after and in the honor of Mindle Sheps. So thank you. As the others have done, I want to thank my teachers, my co-authors, and my students, and I also should thank my wife. So let me start with my teachers. The first time I walked into a formal demography classroom, it was with Hervé Lebras in Paris, France, and he was talking about something to do with periods and cohorts, and I had no idea what he was talking about. And then a few weeks later, it was on the front page of the newspaper because there was a huge debate in France about whether fertility had fallen below replacement. I said, wow, this is actually important. I didn't stay in France to do my PhD. I got to go to Berkeley, and there I got to study with, it turned out, two previous Sheps Awards winner. I got to study formal demography methods and then mathematical demography with Ken Wachter. And then I got to study economic demography with Ron Lee. So I got a nice boost right early on in my career. So Ken and Ron have both joined me in a lot of publications, but I also want to thank two other special co-authors among the many that I've been blessed to have. The first is my Berkeley classmate, Guy Steklov. We've not only done a lot of papers over the years, but we've had a lot of shared adventures in our own lives, by land, by sea, with our families, and together. Formal demography has been a lot of fun for me. I've had a lot of adventures doing it. And then I've also got to be co-author with a childhood friend of mine, Tom Cassidy. He helped me through 11th grade math, and then he became a math professor himself. I think math professors, their ability to do new abstract algebra theorems burns out sometime in their 40s, and then I got him to join me in doing mathematical demography. So finally, I'd like to thank my students, first at Princeton, then at Max Planck, and now at Berkeley, and also at the summer workshops. Success for me would be if I was able to pass on a little of the enthusiasm that I received from my teachers on to them. So thank you very much, PAA, and congratulations to everyone.
Hello, I'm Marcy Carlson at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and it is my distinct honor to present the Sarah McLanahan Award. This award was developed to honor and remember Sarah McLanahan, extraordinary scholar, mentor, and policy advisor, who passed away in December 2021. Sarah made profound contributions to the study of family change, the well-being of children and families, and related social policies. She started her academic career at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and then moved to Princeton University, where she was founding director of the Center for Research on Child Wellbeing and also PI of the now Future of Families and Child Wellbeing study. She was an engaged PAA member, including serving on the board as vice president and then as president in 2004. She also received the Robert J. Lapham Award in 2019. I would also like to thank the members of the McLanahan Award Committee that worked with me, and it was a delight to work with all of you. Kathy Harris at UNC, Margot Jackson at Brown, Shelley Lundberg at UC Santa Barbara, Kelly Music at Cornell, and Rourke O'Brien at Yale. I would also like to recognize Sarah's spouse and collaborator of many years, Irv Garfinkel, who is here with us tonight in the second row. This year's McLanahan Award winner has made extraordinary contributions to the study of families and family change. The nomination letter, signed by 12 distinguished scholars, highlights her impressive record of research examining changes in family formation, living arrangements between non-resident parents and children, child well-being, and parent-child living arrangements and relationship quality in later life. They note that she has inspired family demographers to, quote, move beyond the household as the analytic focus. And she has contributed to a number of data resources that have shaped our understanding of family life, most recently, a new module of the panel study of income dynamics focused on intergenerational transfers and relationships between adult children and their parents. Her work, especially on child support enforcement and fathers, has had notable influence on public policy. Also, she is known for being a warm, generous, and kind mentor. And anyone who has given a talk in her presence has noticed and appreciated her encouraging nods and smiles from the audience. She has been of tremendous service to PAA, including serving on the board and as president. In sum, this nominee has made many contributions in the tradition of Sarah McLanahan and is highly deserving of this award. And I should note that the last time I believe they were together on this PAA stage was when Sarah offered a warm introduction to the nominee's presidential address, which was 12 years after she had done the same for Sarah. I'm honored to present the 2024 Sarah McLanahan Award to Judy Seltzer, Professor Emerita in the Department of Sociology at UCLA. Congratulations.
Okay, I'm going to expect some nods, just reciprocity. First, I want to thank Marcy and the committee, the McLanahan Award Committee, for this honor, and also thanks to the folks who nominated me for this. I'm really honored to be recognized for this work in a field where there are many major contributors whose work I admire very much. I was fortunate to be Sarah McLanahan's colleague and her friend, and the years that we overlapped at the University of Wisconsin were a very exciting time in our linked lives. One way our lives were linked, and Marcy alluded to this, was through Irv Garfinkel, Sarah's spouse, and her research collaborator, who invited me to participate in a large project on child support policies. I've always thought, even though I never actually talked to Sarah about this, that she's the one who gave my name to Irv and got me connected to that project. And it was a wonderful opportunity to interweave study design and data collection with an analysis of what families are and what they do and what difference they can make. Those are the questions Sarah always asked, and she was always asking questions and asking why and then trying to answer those questions. And from our earliest days at the University of Wisconsin, and then through the years and the miles that then separated us, even though we kept in touch when she worked at Princeton and I moved to UCLA, those were the questions and the behavior that drove her. I'm grateful to work in this field where I have wonderful colleagues who are continuing to ask the kinds of questions that Sarah asked and who maintain her curiosity about what is a family and what makes families work. So thank you again very much for this honor.
Hello, everyone. I am a surprise participant on the panel. My name is Sarah Curran from the University of Washington, and I served as Vice President of the PAA in 2020, memorable year in which we went online in a scramble with Eileen Crimmins. And then as President of the Association of Population Centers, I worked closely with the recipient of this next award. For many years, I've also worked with this person since they started in their position at PAA in 2004. This award goes to Mary Jo Hoeksma. Mary Jo is PAA's Director of Government Affairs, as you heard earlier, and she is celebrating her 20th year with our organization. You could do the math. ' In her role as PAA's Director of Government Affairs, Mary Jo advocates for our field at the federal level, working closely with PAA leadership, the leadership of the Association for Population Centers, and our member scientists. She educates congressional and multiple agency staff about the importance of population sciences and the important research that demographers and population scientists conduct. She truly works tirelessly on our behalf. Indeed, it would be hard to overstate how much time and heart she puts into her work as she advocates on our field's behalf with lawmakers and federal agencies. Mary Jo manages our engagement with key agencies of interest, including the NIH, NSF, and the Census Bureau. She leads our field's efforts when public comments and letters of support are needed for critical issues important to us, most often even drafting such language that she knows will be most effective. She organizes our advocacy efforts on Capitol Hill and with agency staff, not only coordinating it all, but also making sure that our scientists know how to manage the meetings effectively and have all the support they need to feel at ease during those high-stake meetings. It's truly invaluable, and I've learned a lot from you, Mary Jo. This is such important and instrumental work, helping to highlight what we do as a field and helping to keep us visible in important national conversations and budgetary debates. For a small organization, PAA has an unexpectedly large and effective government affairs and policy arm over the past 20 years, and this is no doubt due to the understanding of how Washington works, her perseverance, and the knowledge of our field that Mary Jo brings to her unique role on an everyday basis. Mary Jo, today we celebrate your 20 years of service and thank you for your dedication to the population sciences on our organization's behalf. Specifically, your award reads, quote, "In recognition and appreciation for 20 years of exemplary service to the population research community," end quote. Could you please come forward to receive your award? Thank you. Wow, I'm really surprised. I'm the person behind the scenes. I don't get to do this. Well, I just want to thank you so much. It's such an honor representing you. Your science is amazing, and as Danielle said at the top of the bill here, you guys are such a kind community, and it's just such an honor to represent you when I go to Capitol Hill and before the federal agencies that I know are important to your research. I just want to quickly acknowledge, I wouldn't be in this job if it hadn't been for Richard Sussman and Chris Bacharach, who encouraged me to apply, and those two rarely agreed on anything. And to Phil Morgan and John Haga, who were on the hiring committee, and Sarah McLanahan, actually, I remember also played an instrumental role in convincing me to take this job. But I have loved every minute of my last 20 years, and I look forward to, at least 20 more. So thank you.
An amazing group of awardees. I'd like to ask you all to join me in recognizing them again as a group for their outstanding work, research, and to thank them for their contributions to the field. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Mary Waters, who in turn will have the pleasure of introducing Lisa Berkman, who will give the presidential address. Mary is the John L. Loeb Professor of Sociology and the PVK Professor of Arts and Sciences at Harvard University. Mary.
Hi, everyone. It is my great honor to introduce the PAA's immediate past president, Lisa Berkman, who will deliver her presidential address to you today. Lisa is the director of the Harvard Center for Population and Development Studies and the Thomas Cabot Professor of Public Policy, Epidemiology, and Global Health and Population in the Harvard Chan School of Public Health. In this introduction, I will of course describe Lisa's accomplishments as a social scientist, at least some of her accomplishments. I can't go into all of them or we'll be here all night. But I also want to give you a sense of Lisa as a person. To give you a bit of a preview, the one theme running through both the scholarly and personal aspects of Lisa that I will discuss today is community and connection. Lisa not only studies how community and connection positively affect health and aging, but she also creates and nurtures community and connection, bringing people together in many important ways that I will tell you about. So Lisa grew up in New York City in the 1960s, along with her younger sister, Amy. Her dad was a lawyer, and her mother, like many women in the 1960s, at first stayed home with the kids, but then went back to work as a social worker at the VA in the Bronx, where she specialized as a sex therapist working with paraplegic veterans. The field of population science dodged a bullet early in Lisa's life, when Lisa, who was the successful editor of her high school newspaper, pictured here, it will come at some point, but anyway, she was the editor, oh, there it is, of her high school newspaper. Pictured here, Lisa is in the middle, in the center, when she applied for an internship at a famous newspaper as a copy boy. The rejection letter she received pointed out that she had failed to understand a simple fact, that a copy boy did in fact have to be a boy. A rejection that infuriated her and her parents, and that reminds us that Lisa was in a cohort of women who confronted barriers and had to chart a new course, making things a lot easier for those of us following behind. In 1968, Lisa went to Northwestern University, majoring in comparative literature and sociology, taking courses with sociologist Howie Becker on qualitative methods, and during her junior year abroad with Claude Levi-Strauss. She reports that Howie was a lot easier to understand, and it was not just because he was speaking English. After graduation and a year doing family planning outreach, she also applied to study epidemiology at Berkeley. By doing so, she was once again confronting barriers. The students in the program were almost all male physicians. This time, however, Lisa was not rejected for not being a boy, and she entered the program despite having no background in quantitative analysis, and amazingly, not really understanding she would need to learn any statistics to be an epidemiologist. They disabused her of that belief after a few months. Lisa had sought out interdisciplinary training in her graduate studies and joined an interdisciplinary environment in her first job in 1979 at the Yale Institute for Policy and Social Studies. At Yale, she was involved in one of the first community-based studies established by the relatively new National Institute on Aging, a study of the elderly in New Haven that ran from 1986 to 96. A Fulbright sabbatical back in Paris in 93-94 allowed Lisa to begin a long-term collaborative study of 20,000 French gas and electric workers. This study was groundbreaking in that it was primarily designed to look at exposures at work, but it was also very progressive in that it gathered, with Lisa's input, a lot of information on social networks, work and family, and class inequality. After returning from Paris, Lisa was recruited to Harvard, where she has worked for the last 29 years. At Harvard, she continued her work on the social determinants of aging and mortality, expanding into policy realms and into international collaborations. In epidemiology, scholars study exposures and outcomes. Lisa was drawn to the study of aging because it is an outcome that does not have just one cause. Healthy aging reflects all kinds of social influences that have shaped lifetimes. And Lisa demonstrated in her early work the importance of robust social networks. Then she expanded into studying the effects of work on aging and mortality in the French study, as well as with new data that was collected through the NIA-sponsored Health and Retirement Study. Work was a very generative exposure for an epidemiologist. It was understudied compared to other social determinants, such as neighborhoods, but also very important. People spend a great deal of their lives at work, and it has profound effects on health and mortality. It is also something that is amenable to change. Organizations change all the time, and thus it is a determinant of health that can be manipulated. This led Lisa to a new step in her research: randomized trials and interventions to alter work organizations, to reduce stress, and to prevent adverse health outcomes. The study of work-family conflict also drew Lisa's scholarly attention as she began to study policy interventions and international differences in work-family policies to see what could improve health and mortality outcomes. Lisa's studies of social networks and aging using the Health and Retirement Study led her to an international role in advising the sister studies to HRS all over the world. For the last 10 years, with partners from Wits University in Johannesburg and the University of Cape Town, many of whom are here today, Lisa co-leads the Halsey Collaborative Community Study of Aging in rural South Africa. Lisa is the author of over 300 papers and 3 books, including the foundational textbook in epidemiology, co-authored with Ichiro Kawachi, and a second edition co-authored with Ichiro and Maria Glymore. Lisa's been head of the Division of Chronic Disease Epidemiology at Yale and chair of the Department of Health and Social Behavior at Harvard. And perhaps most salient today, she has been director of the Harvard Population Center for the last 17 years. Now, I got to witness Lisa's skill of creating community as she transformed the Harvard Pop Center. It had long been a place where a few senior professors hid out from everyone else and did solitary work. When she took over in 2007, she found population scientists across the university and asked them what they needed to get their work done. She established a real population center with a warm, inviting, and vibrant intellectual community of faculty, students, postdocs, and professional staff. Throughout her career, Lisa has nurtured in her many mentees a respect for the scientific process and an appreciation of interdisciplinary perspectives. Maria Glymore, who worked with Lisa beginning as a graduate student, told me that Lisa has always been an incredible model. She balances a rigorous, critical perspective with a profound optimism about the potential for our research to make new discoveries. After years of working with her, she is still the person in the room whose opinion I most want to hear. Another scholar, trained by Lisa, Laura Kubzansky, said, "One of the attributes I have admired most about Lisa is her ability to build consensus and to lead with grace and humor. I have seen her deflect many difficult or downright nasty comments and manage to achieve her ends without being insensitive or arrogant." Think of that, at Harvard. In this, I have thought of her as a role model. One can be highly successful and maintain humanity. One of my ongoing ambitions is to be as successful a mentor as Lisa is, to be quietly but powerfully transformative. Now, many of you are probably wondering how Lisa does it all: teaching, research, writing, and administration. And in addition, Lisa is the mother of 2 sons and the grandmother of 4 kids. How did the scholar of work-family conflict do it all? I asked her about this, and she replied that her son Andre was born just as she arrived at Yale to begin her job as an assistant professor in September, if I'm remembering correctly. Son Alex followed 4 years later. There were no other moms with kids in her department, and she received some great advice early on that might work for you in your lives. She was told, no one you are working for or with knows what to do. So just figure out what you need and tell them what you are going to do. And so she did. She was lucky in that her husband was an artist and had a flexible schedule. But she remembers those early years as a stressful, hard, and yet not an impossible time. And her own experiences have led her to mentor and lead younger women through these years with a warmth and understanding that comes from personal experience. Today, as Lisa shares her ideas with all of us, she stands on the shoulders of all of the networks and ties that she has created over time, the most important of which, of course, is her family. Pictured here are her 4 grandchildren, and in the audience is her partner, Steve, and her 2 sons. And also in the audience are so many admirers, collaborators, students, and friends. Please please join me in welcoming our speaker, Lisa Berkman.
That was quite the introduction. Thank you very much. I did not expect that at all. So thank you, Mary. So I want to start this off with a quote that I was thinking about when I was struggling to write this paper and think about the talk. In the mid-1960s, Martin Luther King wrote, "Where do we go from here?" The subtitle of which was Chaos or Community. That's the dilemma we face now globally, nationally, and even within our organization. In some sense, my work over my lifetime has been focused with the centrality of community to population health. The title that this summer, as I started the talk, has taken on really increased meaning as events in the Middle East have unfolded and mirrored the same troubles in the US government chaos that we experience today in much of our federal government and maybe state governments as well, and extend, in fact, deep into many of our universities, ours included, maybe first among many. So the question is, chaos or community? The web of social connections that connects and surrounds all of us, more than family, more than neighborhoods, more than work, the entirety and the diversity of the ties that bind us are critical to population well-being. And as time has gone by, I've become even more attuned to the structural, institutional, political, and cultural forces that shape our social relationships and community resources. The ways in which inclusion and exclusion from participation in our societies threatens the social fabric of our relations is incredibly important. Policies like parental leave, marriage, equality, immigration, and housing that legally embed structural racism in the laws determines whether we can maintain close ties and with those we most love and affect how we intersect with everyone in our communities. These ties shape the opportunities and resources we have or denied, the behaviors that are either risky or health promoting, and the stress and resilience we embody that takes the world outside of us and puts it into our every fiber. The institutional barriers shaping collaborations are even evident within PAA, our own organization. As a community of population scientists, from demographers to epidemiologists and economists, we have so much to gain from embracing the full range of approaches used by scientists who truly think of themselves as population scientists and populations not as bunches of just people who are guided by their own personal attitudes and values. Scientists who share population perspectives have a chance to develop what I think is actually a new science, such as biochemistry was once biology and chemistry, and data science has become a new discipline by incorporating and integrating statistics, big data management, and causal inference. We have the opportunity to draw on the strengths of descriptive and causal inference and analytic methods from kindred sciences that share our population perspective. Our collective skills and approaches are sorely needed, but often universities embrace a very narrow departmental structure that doesn't reward or value this broader perspective. Thus, our challenge is to work towards greater acceptance of population science in many of our narrower departmental confines. I think this is especially true for many young people coming up through the ranks. We need to embrace all the methods that we have at our disposal. So my talk today focuses on social integration and community, starting with some of my personal experiences and then moving on to some broader issues. I define community broadly today as oriented towards the structure of networks. I view the opportunities of the community as a group of people who share either the same geographical location, such as a neighborhood or a workplace, or shared experiences, and not defined by geography, but by their own experience. So going back to my own early work, I want you to think, this is a deep breath, 1973, now over 30 years ago. I am an outreach worker for family planning, as Mary had said, in a public health department in San Francisco. I covered an area that included 3 neighborhoods: North Beach, a traditionally Italian neighborhood, Chinatown, and what was called the Tenderloin, an area of San Francisco downtown with a long history characterized by single occupancy hotels and a large number of recent arrivals to the city. The differences in the neighborhoods were stark. They ran the spectrum from most densely rich networks and high levels of cohesion in North Beach and Chinatown to the most isolated. Here we see one of the many cafes in North Beach with both residents of the Italian-American neighborhood in North Beach, as well as poets and writers who flocked to North Beach during this period. This one is actually the Cafe Trieste, and coincidentally, the owner of this, Johnny Giotta, had his family own this cafe and lived upstairs from us on our 3-story walk-up when we lived in North Beach and I had this job. This slide actually shows men and women doing Tai Chi in Washington Square Park, a park that kind of abuts both Chinatown and North Beach. And this is a hotel in the Tenderloin. This area stood in stark contrast to the other 2. Here, young women and men I met and who had just arrived, often on a bus from a more rural area to a single room in a downtown hotel, like the one you see here. Often young people left these smaller towns where they were marginalized for one reason or another and hoped to become more connected and feel more community as they moved to San Francisco. In downtown Tenderloin, new arrivals mostly were not met at all. No contacts, no one else knew each other. They didn't know how to reach out and find a job. They were disconnected to any kind of health care. After working in this community and contrasting it with the communities of Asian American and Italian Americans, I started to actually doubt that my capacity as an outreach worker was being really effective, and it could be more impactful and meaningful. The experiences drove me to graduate school. At the time, I thought I would never go, and brought home to me the ways in which inequality, social isolation, and exclusion were all intertwined. So off to graduate school to UC Berkeley. I started in my epidemiology program, as Mary said, as one of 2 women in the class, and we were also happened to be the only 2 non-MDs. My advisor, Len Syme, to whom I owe very much, was taking a risk in accepting what he called funny people. I didn't actually know when they admitted me that I was a funny person, but that was me. And the idea was to see if they could make it. The really odd thing was that actually Len Syme was a sociologist from Yale who was trained by Hollingshead, another funny person. By that time, I actually had a mentor from sociology who was Claude Fisher, who was incredibly well-trained and important to me in terms of social network analysis, and Richard Lazarus, a psychologist who developed many of the foundational theories of stress and coping and resilience. My dissertation on the impact of social connections and immortality was supported unimpeded, I might say, by 3 intellectual leaders in 3 departments: epidemiology, sociology, social psychology. 3 people I would call population scientists. This deeply interdisciplinary training, which I so valued then, has really guided all my work all the way up until PAA participation and leadership. I would also say, and we don't always go back this far, and I didn't know him personally, it would be fair to say that the theoretical work of much of what I base my work on was done by Durkheim. Durkheim's primary aim was to explain what seemed like the most personal, most intimate individual of acts, that is suicide, was the function of social facts, in this case, social integration. He reveals that in times of social change and economic and political instability, social control is weakened, and there is an erosion of society's capacity for social integration. We see disintegration. So he says, the individuals making up society change from year to year, yet the number of suicides itself doesn't change. The population of Paris renews itself very rapidly, yet the share of Paris in the total number of French suicides remain practically the same. This thus causes, which thus fix the contingent of voluntary deaths for a given society, or one part of it, must be independent of individuals. And since they retain the same, since the places retain the same intensity, no matter what particular people come and go. The theoretical underpinning, along with this recent work on social networks, proved a very strong framework. The network research demonstrated that assumptions about the roles of family or kin could not explain social behavioral or health outcomes. In each case, the lines between the role of kin and non-kin were blurred. Weak ties were powerful to find jobs and get instrumental things done. Intimate ties were critical for emotional support. So social network theory then, which I'm focusing on today, gives a window to frame social connections and lets us let go of assumptions and biases about who should do what for whom, and to observe and identify really how things work. This larger framework led to what I'm going to talk about today, a framework in which it started with actually social and structural determinants of social network structure and function, and then it proceeds downward to look at pathways which then produce population health and ultimately population health writ large. However, I'm not going to tell you the story in the linear way that it's seen here, because actually nobody ever works like that, and I certainly didn't either. In fact, almost nobody looks at the full arc of this work. So I'm going to begin today with where we actually have most of the evidence, and that is on the association between social isolation and mortality. And then I'm going to move downstream to describe how social networks might impact health and the pathways, and then focus on social networks themselves, and then finally, using experimental approaches, focus on social and economic and political structures and link them with the social networks and population health. While there are many, many ways in which we might look at the politics that guide these factors, I've become very interested, as Mary said, in workplace policies. So I'm going to illustrate this entire framework with some examples of workplace policy and organizational interventions. Working conditions impact not only social ties at work, but they have incredible spillover effects to family and community ties. And I'll close this talk with the future directions and how focusing on working conditions, in this case, illustrates how we can actually improve population health by understanding and identifying the conditions that produce disconnection. So, starting in the middle, I would like to show a slide the first slide of an ecocentric network that I saw. It was produced by Jeremy Boissevin. Here the person is surrounded by a web of social relations, some very intimate to very extended ties. We have learned from other innovators in social network research that while small intimate ties are really good for emotional support, it's the larger extended ties that you see in the effective, nominal, and extended zone that actually help us get jobs and get many other tasks done. And we've owed a lot of this work to Mark Granovetter, who talked about great title of a paper, The Strength of Weak Ties. So when I finally envisioned how I would actually study this very abstract and theoretical idea, the studies and data existing were really, really quite limited. It required a big leap to look at the questions that we might look at, but ultimately I landed upon the Alameda County study launched by Lester Breslow, and it turned out to have really precociously asked questions about ties with close friends and relatives, questions about affiliations and religious communities and voluntary associations, and from a population perspective, it had 9 years of mortality, really irrefutable health outcome. So questions about race, socioeconomic status, mortality data, health behaviors were all included. So here we show that when we looked at this, we found that people who were isolated, who lacked in a number of ties in a number of domains, were 1.8 times more likely to die in this 9-year period from all causes than those who had more ties across domains. Here we see 4 categories of network connections along the horizontal x-axis, from the very socially connected with the lowest mortality rates all on to the highest mortality rates for men and women individually. So several take-homes from this. One was that no single tie was really important or really the driver. So being married was important. It reduced your risk, but it only reduced it slightly. 2, it didn't matter whether you had close friends or relatives. It didn't matter whether you had religious ties or ties to community organizations, as long as you had some. There was a great deal of substitutability and exchangeability into this risk. 3, while poverty was associated with more isolation, working middle and upper middle class men and women tended to have similar levels of ties, albeit very different compositions. Some networks were composed of kin, others of friends, some of religious groups, some of community groups. It didn't matter. What mattered was that the individual had some ties along any of these domains. And there wasn't any one single right way. So this work was accepted in AJE, the American Journal of Epidemiology, without revisions. My mentor said, don't expect this to happen again. And believe me, it hasn't. That was my high point. There was also a great deal of press around this at the time. It was really a very novel finding. And the first news piece came out in the San Francisco Chronicle, and it's shown here. You'll notice that underneath the caption, it says she doesn't know why. They also misspelled my name. That's okay. So the lesson is, the one thing that everyone teaches young scholars, don't ever answer journalists in a way that you don't want to be quoted. So here it is. I only did this once. After that, you get much better. But of course we didn't know why. Nobody knew why at that point. We knew a little bit about what it wasn't. It wasn't economic factors only, it wasn't health behaviors, but we didn't really have an explanation. So social networks were influenced in small ways by many, many factors. And in longitudinal findings, we now know that these findings are replicable, were bidirectional. The one thing that we really did learn soon after was that the findings were replicable. It wasn't a one-off. Shortly after we reported our finding, Jim House at Michigan, who was working really simultaneously, found similar risks in 1982 from the Tecumseh study, and that started a wave of scholarship focused on social ties and health. There are now meta-analyses on social ties in the 2020s, all showing the same kinds of things. So critical to this issue of exposure is the toxicity of exposure, is the effect of social isolation, exclusion, or disconnection the same everywhere, or for all ages, or around the world. And here I'm going to show you a couple of findings, some that we had already published and some new. Here's work from the Gallup World Poll of 139 countries, clustered into regions. In virtually every region, the odds ratios go from 1.7 to 2.2 for the years between 2005 and 2009. Enormously consistent results. We've recently updated this thanks to the work of Dana Javadi, who has been the research assistant who's been critical in this study. And we've updated these data to look from 2010 to 2020 using the Gallup again. The answer to the toxicity question is really the risks are quite similar. So what's missing from our story here? Replicating work over and over again only gets you so far. It doesn't answer many of the still mysterious links about both upstream and downstream factors. So let's get back to the she doesn't know why question. Think about the pathways. The biological link between social connection or disconnection and health was really virtually unknown when we started this work. We know a lot more now, and this was true generally with other social determinants of health. We know that social networks confer protection from almost every cause of death we've studied, including both infectious and non-infectious disease. We know now that there are likely multiple pathways leading from social isolation or disconnection to population health. I've listed a bunch of them here. Many of them are identified before: social support, social influence, person-to-person contact that was brought home during COVID, but also in some wonderful earlier work on HIV transmission and sexually transmitted diseases. And we also know that it relates to access to resources and biological pathways. So the biological pathways is very interesting because we've come to call this accelerated aging. That is, biological embedding may best be viewed in this way as the force that makes you more susceptible to many diseases or environmental exposures. The science of identifying the biological pathways linking social experiences to health has grown into an entire field. Eileen Crimmins, who's here today, is a leading, if not like the leading, biodemographer, has made incredible scientific progress in this area at the population level. In fact, identifying the field of biodemography as a strong area for population science. Identifying early biological pathways is not just of scientific interest from a causal perspective, although it is interesting from that perspective. The aim is that we're able to identify pre-disease pathways that occur much earlier in life, which might lead to ways of preventing disease. So while there's still a great deal to learn about the pathways, we at least have something to build on. So now I want to turn my attention to two other issues which are central to population scientists. One is the descriptive distribution of social networks, and the second is to think about the upstream social conditions. So focusing for a minute on the distribution of social networks. The distribution of social isolation and social integration builds upon, I think, demographers' very greatest skills. Yet there's very limited attention that has been oriented to understanding fundamental questions of social demography in this area. The description of the distribution is so central. Nowhere is there more inconsistency than in this area, which I'm going to show in terms of trends over the United States. Any simple Google search turns up a narrative where the US faces an epidemic of social isolation, disconnection, and loneliness. The Surgeon General has an entire report on this topic of loneliness. The World Health Organization has launched a commission on social isolation and loneliness. The evidence shows substantial changes in social isolation and declines. Perhaps the strongest evidence from this supporting this perspective is from the American Time Use Survey. Looking at trends from 2003 to 2020, I want to emphasize that this is an area that's calling for demographic analysis, and I'm going to show you why. In the American Time Use Survey that goes to just up to the pandemic, we see trends for men and women for social isolation. This is from the American Time Use Survey, talking about hours. The figure shows increases in social isolation between 2003 and 2020, decreases in social engagement, both with family and with friendship patterns, as well as more general companionships, follow these same trends. In these analyses, we also see that Black Americans experience more social isolation. In general, it's the blue line at the top, and also an increase. And this figure shows the greatest changes over time expressed by younger men and women. It's the blue line that you looked at moving, 15 to 24. In clear contrast to this growing epidemic of loneliness and isolation is an analysis of the General Social Survey done by Marsden and Srivastava, showing much less change over time in socializing. They use much more classical demographic approaches, decomposing age, period, and cohort changes over the period that the GSS asks consistent questions. Marsden and Srivastava, who analyzed trends in socializing between 1974 and 2008, so not exactly the same years. First, we see the age differences again, showing that there are substantial differences, high points in younger age and declining afterwards. This is showing the age. And here we show the trends. So these are similar to the Time Use Survey trends. Here we move to really period differences in 4 different measures of socializing, taking into consideration age and cohort effects. Trends are really small, with the largest declines seen among socializing among neighbors, where there seems to be a little dip, but there's also a slight increases in seeing relatives and relatively steady for friends. So we've updated these analyses, again with the help of Dana Javadi, to look at up until 22. So these trends now go from earlier, 1974, to 2022 along the horizontal axis, using similar but not identical methods. Here we see relatively steady trends since 1980, a dip in 1980, with a well-identified dip in 2004 that is the result of a series of methodological changes, and their conclusions taken together are that they don't suggest such dramatic changes in informal social contact. The clearest downward trend is maybe for neighboring. So here we go back to the data from Gallup. Looking at Gallup for the years 2010 to 2021, they show no clear trends. Jim Ramo, in some of his really beautiful recent work using very classical demographic approaches using HRS data, remarks that the loneliness has been relatively stable in this older population of adults over the last 20 years. Claude Fisher and his analysis of social ties finds much the same regarding trends in his work in the California surveys as well as some of the Gallup surveys, and concludes, much as I would say Mark Twain did, the news of my death or social isolation is greatly exaggerated. So the question of whether the US is truly experiencing an epidemic of social isolation, I think, is left hanging. It's waiting for population scientists to insist on consistent measures over long periods of time and appropriate analytic methods to understand time trends, or in fact, real period effects. The greatest differences may well be due to mode of assessment between the time use survey and these general social surveys. So then, moving along, critical for us to know now is how to improve social ties, the thing that has become interesting to me most over the last decade or so. To do this optimally, we want to identify the drivers of social isolation, structural, economic, political, and then identify what we can do to reduce social isolation and ultimately improve population health. There are likely a large number of social and economic policies that drive social isolation. Often mentioned, especially for the impact on younger people, is the role of social media, but more generally we see labor and working conditions that might impact social isolation through family leave, flexible scheduling, housing and neighborhood policies, direct social network policies, and family and reproductive health policies around marriage, child tax credits, reproductive justice, access to abortion, IVF, things like that. These legal and political forces, including redlining to housing, et cetera, have the potential to really have powerful effects. At this very moment, threats to marriage equality, reproductive rights further threaten the stability of families. These public policies and practices have families and make families and communities harder to sustain. Here we see the large number of policies and economic and social and environmental challenges that are upstream of social isolation. Labor policies and working conditions, housing, neighborhoods, direct social policies are really important. In fact, there is currently a bill being discussed in the Senate proposed by Christopher Murphy, a Democratic senator from Connecticut. It calls for the establishment of a national strategy for social connection with an office in the executive office of the president. The bill calls, it's hard to read the small print, but the bill calls for improvement in public education and support, importantly for us, for continued research and data on social disconnection. So I'm now going to turn my attention to a focus on labor policy and conditions as contributors to the future of community and determinants on health. I focus on this initially because of findings of an important National Academy of Medicine panel that I was part on that was led by Sam Preston and Eileen Crimmins. It's one that you're, I think, often very familiar with. It looks at the explaining divergent trends in longevity in high-income countries. First, the NAM report highlighted stagnating life expectancy in the United States. Those are the red dots compared to all the other countries. And we see this stagnation, especially for women, on one side where they've virtually fallen off the chart, from birth to age 50 across a number of OECD countries. The demography was terrific. As a member of a panel, it seemed that identifying the drivers of why the US was much more elusive. The NAM report basically examined all the usual suspects: smoking, diet, healthcare, alcohol consumption, and they all concluded that while smoking was important in some, all in all, the risk factors were only very partially responsible for this decline in US rankings. There are undoubtedly a number of factors that shape these trends relating to inequality, violence in America, and many more. However, we started to think that the US was exceptional in a way that we hadn't thought of. In fact, I hadn't thought of during the entire report. Prominent among the social and technological changes were changes in working conditions, especially central to the more diverse demographic groups of people in the workforce today. The labor force today and over the last 50 years is increasingly comprised of women and older workers and represents the racial and ethnic diversity of the American population today. Working conditions in the US challenge opportunities for community for everyone. Let me be really clear that everyone suffers by a lot of poor working conditions. However, in the United States, some other things went on. As we talked about earlier, fertility in the US had actually remained generally steady during this time, while in other countries it had really fallen. Women had joined the workforce in substantial numbers in post-World War II era, yet unlike almost all other European countries experiencing similar changes, we had few or virtually no federal family-friendly policies, parental leave, or flexible work conditions compared to other countries. So we were in a rather exceptional position. And we were not alone in starting to think about this as an important thing. These are New York Times quotes that I collect periodically. I want to say women did everything right, work got greedy, older workers looking for a job finding bias, lowest ever black jobless rate is still twice that of whites. Single moms are surging into the workforce. Even in better times, some Americans seem farther behind. Here's why. And the one that I really, really like, I am working a reduced schedule for the next 18 years, and will have limited access to email. I will reply to your message when the nature of American capitalism changes. Pretty well sums it up. So, are we at the breaking point? One approach we took to this was first to actually identify if there were health impacts of working conditions, particularly job control interacting with family composition. Observational evidence suggested that job strain, high demands, low control were very important, and family composition could be linked to a broad array of outcomes. Job strain itself had had a long history of being connected with many disease outcomes, especially cardiovascular disease and musculoskeletal pain. So when coupled with family composition, or having young children, or being a single parent, what would the risks look like? So this is a study that we did that was led by Erica Sabbath, and here we see data from the Health and Retirement Study that job control is by itself related to increased mortality risk. High control is kind of the red bars that you see. Low control is the purple or lower ones. We see this in the darker red bars. The strata along the horizontal x-axis are first the average married mother, then single women who had children later in life, and then longer-term single moms, and then long-term married mothers, and then married women who had children later in life in the end. The highest group, when single moms with young children experience low job control, their risks are magnified, and the combination is especially toxic. The lowest risks are actually for mothers with high control jobs who had children in later life, many of us. In a substantial and growing literature on work and family strains and organizational conditions at work, such as schedule control and flexibility. Leading scholars, including Erin Kelly and Phyllis Mohn, Leslie Hammer, and Ellen Kosick, identified a set of working conditions that were associated with work-family conditions. So this leads then to the focus. So the question now is, now that we observe this, is actually what can we do to improve health by reducing exposure to toxic environments? This kind of intervention requires us to move beyond observational methods, such as those that I've been showing you, and move towards experimental approaches. It requires us to know about the etiologic period at risk, that is the risk when exposure is most toxic, and when we can actually modify the exposure itself. It may comes at a point where you can't change the exposure. It requires us to have a much deeper understanding of life course models. Moving from observational studies to experimental and quasi-experimental studies is moving to understand how to change the social conditions and show improvements in population. The experimental approach builds on two traditions, many of which you know. One is that the investigator develops and tests the intervention, and the second in which we observe classically natural or policy experiments in which a policy, law, or social change permits us to look at the impact of conditions on work. Both are really, really critically important. Both shed light on how and when changing the social environment changes or can change health. They help to strengthen causal arguments, as well as really from a population perspective, tell us when we can actually improve health. So I'm going to give you some examples. This is a case of maternity leave, looking at the health at older ages using SHARE. It's a paper I've done with Maurizio Avendano and Giacomo Passini and Bougainville, and we looked at the impact of maternity leave on the long-run risk of depression in European countries where we could actually couple OECD data on maternity leave policies from 1960 to 2010. This figure shows the variation by year of maternity leave policies, that is paying full wage weeks for a certain amount of time across countries. Variations across countries and over time ensured that we could assess the impact of this policy using a difference in difference models. By the way, we haven't included Sweden in the figure, even though it's included in our analysis, because it would be kind of up to the ceiling in terms of benefits. So up until this time, most of the work on family leave and health has focused on the well-being of children, not on women. And in economics, there had been some work showing that women who had better work histories and retirement benefits when they could take family leave, in large part because it enabled them to stay in the workforce. And it would confer long-term benefits. Here we show the difference in difference models, comparing employed women who gave birth to a child in a country with generous maternity benefits compared to women who didn't live in such a country. The results of this policy analysis using quasi-experimental methods showed that women who were working in countries with generous paid maternity leave policy were about 16.2% less likely to have high levels of depressive symptoms 30 or 40 years after the birth of their children. An impressive finding in terms of a long arm of middle age, not just childhood. So during this period, NIH and other foundations started to investigate designing behavioral interventions and social interventions. NIOSH, the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, actually moved from focusing on just physical environmental factors to organizational issues and launched the Total Worker projects. From our own perspective, there was growing evidence of both work-family conflict as well as working conditions that were linked to high level of conflict and led the population dynamics branch of NICHD to launch one of the most ambitious experiments it had ever undertaken. With observational evidence in hand, they called for a network of demographers, population health scientists, and organizational psychologists to come together to develop a randomized group-level intervention in the workplace to reduce work, family, and improve worker physical and mental health, as well as be good for the workplace in terms of reducing absenteeism. The intervention itself ultimately focused on two components. One was training supervisors to be more attuned to work-family balance and issues of equity and fairness, and two, employee and supervisor group team approaches to develop new approaches to scheduling and how work was conducted and increase worker voice. The intervention was conducted in two industries, one in technology industry, and the second was the long-term care industry of direct care workers, almost all of whom were nurses or CNAs. The tech industry was middle wage earners with more education, and the long-term care industry was made up of lower wage earners. The results of the intervention are really impressive. I'm just summarizing them here. In this slide, we see, focusing on the IT workers, that the results showed that they improved job satisfaction, sleep disruption, quality, schedule control, supervisory support for work family, and it reduced burnout in the red, burnout, stress, psychological distress, work family conflicts, and cardiometabolic risk, which I'll come back to at the end. The intervention had fewer impacts in the nursing home, shown here. In part, we believe because nursing homes are so tightly regulated, it was actually hard to do the intervention fully in this group. Recently, we actually completed work among older workers, and those completed work showing cardiometabolic risk was improved by the intervention. Among older workers and those with at least moderate levels of cardiometabolic risk at baseline, those in the intervention group had smaller cardiometabolic risk changes based on objectively measured biomarkers. The slide shows the difference in intervention and control with each increase in cardiometabolic risk. From low risk at baseline, those are the lines that aren't blue and not significant, to the blue lines that do show significance. Results indicate that the work-family intervention benefited employee health by reducing the cardiometabolic risk, equivalent to about 5 to 10 years of age-related changes for those with the highest cardiometabolic risk. So over the last decade, increasing research on the impact of working conditions highlights the impact of insecure and precarious work, long work hours, undependable schedules, work by Danny Schneider, Kirsten Harknett on the Shift Project, and Susan Lambert working on GAP, all point to the critical importance of schedule control, especially for working class populations. These interventions most often have components relating to improved social relationships between supervisors and workers or among workers themselves, giving worker voice about how to improve work and how work is organized so that it itself is less stressful. Workplace policies do, in fact, improve population health, so they give us hope that we can do other things. Placing these findings in the larger perspective, work is an important social determinant of health. Just as social determinants theories recognize the central importance of structural or institutional change, increasingly we identify population costs of poor working conditions and recognizing that changing toxic environments is more effective than asking individuals to adapt to toxic working conditions. Workplace policies and practices address issues of inequality and in themselves serve as direct contributors to economic inequality by obviously influencing wage control, but also by enabling or deterring the ability of workers to work in challenging situations and to remain in the workforce and manage the lives. outside of work. So let's come back to the chaos on community. We really have to choose community here, especially at this point in America and, in fact, internationally. Future PAA scholars and practitioners can so critically explore the many gaps we have to understand the drivers of population health and well-being. We can point out the ways in which our major institutions, from our own PAA society to our universities and clear on out to the nations and globe, neglect community and don't recognize the paramount importance of population well-being. Institutions and policies that say they are family-friendly but don't support or sustain families as they have emerged in the 21st century are not family-friendly. They're anti-family. Similarly, immigration and housing policies that sacrifice long-standing communities while stating noble community goals often cause the destruction of these other neighborhoods and communities. They destroy strong communities. Work that places vulnerable workers in precarity or having them make the heart-wrenching decision to care for their loved ones, either economically by going to work or emotionally and instrumentally by staying home, cause the destruction of community. As population scientists, we have yet to turn our attention fully to these issues. But we have the tools, especially collectively, if we create our own community. So I'd like to close and thank my community. First of all, my family, 2 sons and their wives pictured here, and my partner, Steve, who has actually withstood my incredible focus on writing this paper over the last year, and really accepted it wholeheartedly. To everybody at the Pop Center, I can't thank Dana Javadi in the audience enough for supporting this work and being my research assistant, Mary for the incredible introduction that you gave, Nicole for doing slides that I think made the presentation effective, at least I hope it did, and Laura Price, who's our executive director, and Claudette Augustin, who helped with the planning and are here today, and all of the people at the Pop Center at Harvard who actually gave me such helpful comments. And of course, PAA. I can't thank Jim. Jim said we split it evenly. I don't think we split it evenly. I think he did like at least 60, and I did 40 over the last year, but has been really terrific. And everybody at the PA offices, Danielle, Bobby, Mary Jo, Betsy, and all the PA leadership, many of whom I've seen here, people who've given these speeches in the past, many thanks. And also many thanks to NIA and NICHD, who have really stood by this work. At times, they've been incredibly brave in supporting all of this work. And finally, to all the collaborators I have around the world, many colleagues from South Africa here today and France, I owe so much to you. I am indeed really fortunate to have such an extended network. So thank you very much, and thank you for coming. And I think we are done. Thank you. There, and the Harvard group, I can see. Thanks. So it's drinks, right? Is that?